What's up, you guys? It's your favorite storyteller here. It's Candy. So I got another case for you guys. Today we're going to be going over the Zodiac Killer. I know you guys, know that this was a huge case, very controversial, confusing, but intriguing all at the same time. Now, the name Zodiac Killer is actually the pseudonym of an unidentified serial killer who murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October of 1969. More potential victims were believed to have been attached to him, 28 to be exact, but claims as high as 37. But nothing was made certain. A lot of people have attempted to solve the case and say who they think was the killer. But still, in 2025, no one was for sure named the culprit yet. A lot of people were, like I said, named and talked about, but today we're just going to go ahead and dive into the potential perk as well as the killings and clues left by the Zodiac Killer. So let's get into it. His known attacks took place in Benicia, Vallejo, unincorporated Napa County, and the city and county of San Francisco proper. Let's start with Santa Barbara. Now, Robert Domingos and his fiancée Linda Edwards were seniors at Lompoc High School in Santa Barbara County in Southern California. On Tuesday, June 1963, the couple decided to partake in Senior Ditch Day and go out to the beach near Gaviota, might have said that wrong, State Park, to sunbathe. Well, they unfortunately didn't return home, and by Wednesday, Robert's father went to the beach to look for him due to the people telling him of the places he could have been. His father was horrified because he happened upon the bodies of both teenagers. They were lying together inside the remains of a crumbling shack. They were bound with rope. It shows where they attempted to escape but were shot and killed with a .22 caliber weapon. Robert was shot 11 times and Linda had been shot 9 times. The killer then dragged the bodies to the shack where he tried and failed to start a fire. What a dummy. Investigators had few leads, but in 1972, the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department announced a possible Zodiac connection. The beach killer used Winchester Western Super X ammunition, the same ammunition used by the Zodiac during the 1968 murders on Lake Herman Road. The Domingos and Edwards case also had similarities to the Zodiac's attack of another young couple at Lake Berryessa in 1969. Now, in Riverside, Sherry Josephine Bates, who lived with her father Joseph and was a student at Riverside City College, was 18 years old. On October 30th, 1966, she left to go to the library and left her dad a note as well telling him. She never returned home, and the next day, her Volkswagen Beetle was found abandoned in the library parking lot. Her body was lying between 2 houses, and she had been stabbed several times. Her throat was also slashed. Police found a men's Timex watch at the crime scene, a print from a military boot, and some hairs and dried blood on the victim's hand. Her purse was intact, and an autopsy revealed no evidence of sexual assault. That's amazing. 1 month after the murder, the local newspaper and the police department received typewritten letters titled A Confession from someone who claimed to be the killer. The author wrote, and I quote, "Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. I'm not sick. I am insane," end quote. In April 1967, the newspaper, the police, and Joseph Bates received identical handwritten letters that read, and I quote, "Bates had to die. There will be more," end quote. The notes were all signed Z. Now, the Z was a symbol that resembled the letter. In 1969, Riverside police contacted investigators in Northern California regarding the similarities between the Zodiac crimes and the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. Sherwood Morrill, then documents examiner, for the California Department of Justice, concluded that the Zodiac was responsible for the notes linked to the Bates case. The Riverside connection was later revealed to the public by Paul A., a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. Zodiac then sent a letter to the Los Angeles Times indicating that the killer confirmed the theory that he had killed Bates. The Zodiac wrote, and I quote, "I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy one. There are a hell of a lot more down there," end quote. Woo-hoo! He was letting y'all know. Years later, Riverside police rejected the Zodiac's theory and focused on a man who they said was a jilted former lover of bait. And in the late 1990s, police obtained a sample of the suspect's DNA to compare with the DNA taken from the hairs found in the victim's hand in 1966. Now, the DNA didn't match, and the suspect denied any involvement in the murder. Next is Benicia. 5 nights before Christmas, high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday set out on their first official date together, promising Betty Lou's parents they'd be home by 11 p.m. Shortly after that time, passing motorists saw the Rambler and its occupants parked at the Lover's Lane spot along Lake Herman Road in Benicia. Moments later, another driver noticed 2 seemingly lifeless bodies on the side of the road. Benicia police and others responded to the scene and discovered Betty Lou dead with 5 bullet wounds in her back. David was found next to the Rambler with the bullet hole in his head. Still breathing but near death. Bullet holes in the car's roof and back window indicated that the killer may have fired warning shots to force the victims out of the vehicle. Shell casings recovered at the crime scene identified ammunition as Winchester Western Super X copper coated. Ballistic evidence indicated that the killer used a .22 caliber, possibly a J.C. Higgins model 80 semi-automatic pistol. Investigators believe that the 2 teenagers were likely random targets killed by a stranger for unknown reason. Now, in Vallejo, Darlene Farron, waitress at a restaurant, was picked up by a friend named Michael Magoo, might have said that wrong, on July 4th. They were stopped in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park. Why they stopped there, it was never said. But Michael would later tell the police that while they were there, another vehicle pulled in the parking lot around midnight and then left only to return minutes later. Once the driver returned, he got out of the car, shined a bright light on them, and then fired shots into the car with a 9mm handgun. Now, Michael was shot in the jaw, shoulder, and leg. Darlene was hit several times. So at 12:40 p.m. that night, a call was later traced to a gas station payphone to where a man rang the Vallejo Police Department and claimed responsibility for the shooting as well as the unalivings on Lake Herring Road. According to the police dispatcher, the caller spoke in a low, monotonous voice saying, and I quote, "I want to report a murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye," end quote. Now, Darlene died on arrival at the hospital, but Michael survived. No viable suspects were ever identified. So at Lake Berryessa on a Saturday in late September, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing on the shore at the lake, which was 30 miles north of Napa, when a man appeared holding a gun and wearing a hooded costume with a white cross circle stitched on his chest. So he told them he had escaped from a prison and needed money in a car to escape to Mexico. Now, how he just gonna walk up to them and say that, right? I would have thought he was trying something then and would have tried to get the hell up out of there. But I bet they probably thought it was funny or weird and looked at him or told him to go on somewhere. Damn dummies. But he wound up binding their wrists with pre-cut lengths of clothesline and without warning, just plunged a large knife into Brian's back 6 times. He then stabbed Cecilia 10 times, but she wasn't going to just go down. And she fought him for her life, baby, okay? Now, after the man was done, he walked over to Brian's car and used a pin to draw a cross circle on the door with the dates and locations of the previous attack. The date September 27, 69, the time 6:30, and the notation by knife. At 7:40 p.m., a man called the Napa Police Department to report a double murder. The caller described Brian's car, directed police to the scene of the crime, and confessed, saying, and I quote, "I'm the one who did it." Police traced the call to a payphone at a car wash in Napa. Cecilia died 2 days later, but Brian did survive. Wow. These poor people, they went through a lot back then, man. So in San Francisco, Paul Stein, a cab driver, picked up a fare headed to a destination in the upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood at the intersection of Washington and Cherry Street. The passenger shot Stein in the head and removed a piece of his shirt. Wow, I can't be a cab driver. That's why I wanted to be a cab driver, boy, back in the day. But I was like, they being robbed and shot. The man walked away just before the police police arrived. But the police radio broadcast mistakenly described the suspect as a black man, and passing officers dismissed a white man resembling the correct disposition. Damn, they almost had him. So y'all gonna sit up here and blame the black people? You know they so racist, okay? And he was right there, walking past, and y'all still ain't catch him. Damn, police was dumb, I swear. They had a chance to catch the actual Zodiac Killer, y'all. Crazy, right? Now, fingerprints found on the driver's side of the cab may have belonged to the killer, and a sketch was produced based on descriptions provided by witnesses. The case was considered a routine robbery until the office of the San Francisco Chronicle received an envelope with a letter from the Zodiac, which began with the words, and I quote, "I am the murderer of the taxi driver," end quote. The envelope also contained a blood-stained piece of Paul's shirt. The Zodiac denied he left fingerprints and claimed the police sketch was inaccurate because he had one of the guys. Oh, whoa. Now, in the Modesto area, on a Sunday in late March, Kathleen Johns and her infant daughter was in their station wagon traveling from San Bernardino to visit her sick mother in Petaluma, which is in the northern part of California. Now, Kathleen was also 7 months pregnant, so she had a lot going on, y'all. As she traveled on Highway 132 near Modesto, another vehicle pulled alongside the station wagon, and the driver appeared to be signaling for Kathleen to pull over. So she did. She probably thought something was wrong. Now, once on the side of the road, the other car pulled over also and told her that the back wheel of her car was loose, but he could fix the problem for her. She didn't believe him, and she tried to pull off, but he had already loosened the lug nut on her tire, when he went down to tell her, oh, something was wrong with your car, of course. And when she tried to pull off, the wheel fell off. So he then offered to give her a ride to a gas station. She took him up on the offer, of course, being pregnant and then having an infant with her also. But once she got into the car, she saw he had other plans. She knew she made a mistake. She claimed he made threats to harm her child, and Kathleen wound up grabbing her daughter and jumped out the car. Now, it doesn't say if the vehicle was in motion when her and the baby jumped out, but I'm sure it was. And because he didn't want to get caught or seen on a busy highway by others, he just kept on driving. So a passing driver who saw her jump out took Kathleen and the baby to a nearby police station where she was able to identify the stranger from a police sketch of the Zodiac. Months later, a Zodiac letter mentioned a rather interesting ride with a woman and her baby. That would actually prove her story. But ain't you sick? How you gonna get a pregnant lady and her baby? Gosh. So in Lake Tahoe, a postcard attributed to the Zodiac featured an advertisement for a condominium project in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, with the phrases "past Lake Tahoe areas" and "sought victim 12." Some interpreted the cryptic message as a clue to the disappearance of 25-year-old Donna Lass. In May 1970, Donna worked in San Francisco, at Letterman General Hospital, located in the Presidio military base near the area where the Zodiac killed the cab driver. Donna moved northeast to South Lake Tahoe and found work as a nurse for the Sahara Hotel and Casino. Now, on September 6, 1970, Donna vanished sometime after the last entry in her work logbook at 1:50 a.m. Her car was later found abandoned near her apartment. According to some accounts, an unidentified man called Donna's employer and her landlord, claiming she had to leave town due to family emergency. Donna's family told authorities there was no such emergency and the man was never identified. Now, investigators suspected Donna had been abducted and killed, but her body was never found. Her disappearance remained a mystery, and her name was added to the long list of possible Zodiac victims. My thing with that one, right? How would he know to contact the employee and the landlord? This man must have knew her. And this was one of those people who was trying to use the Zodiac as a means to killing her. They just kind of used the Zodiac as a ploy. But this seemed like somebody who knew her. Now, in Albany, the search for new leads in a Zodiac case led investigators across the U.S. to Albany, New York. The office of the Albany Times-Union newspaper received an envelope postmarked August 1st, 1973, with a cross circle drawn in the corner instead of a return address. So the letter read, and I quote, "You are wrong. I'm not dead or in the hospital. I am alive and well. And I'm going to start killing again. Below is the name and location of my next victim, but you had better hurry up because I'm going to kill her August 10th at 5 p.m. when the shift changes. Albany is a nice town," end quote. Below the message, the writer included 3 rows of symbols. According to an FBI report, Bureau cryptic analysts deciphered the coded message to read, it's redacted, "Albany Medical Center is only the beginning." Investigators were unable to identify any murders, though, that could explain the vague reference to a victim on August 10th. Handwriting experts could not determine if the new letter was prepared by the writer of the Zodiac letters, but due to the lack of significant characteristics, they said, that's what they said the reason was. In the Albany message, but possibility could not be eliminated based on the limited analysis. Now let's look at some of the evidence collected over time. August 4th, 1969, a 3-page letter turned up and was turned over to the police from the San Francisco Examiner complaining that he, the Zodiac Killer, wasn't on the front page. There was also a photocopy of the envelope plus another 2-page letter that was addressed to the San Francisco Examiner along with the cipher. A photocopy envelope and a 2-page letter addressed to the San Francisco Chronicle plus the cipher. A photocopy envelope and a 2-page letter addressed to the Vallejo Time-Herald and a cipher. They were all fully examined thoroughly. August 6, 1969, a letter addressed to a certain sergeant at the Vallejo Police Department stating that he, the Zodiac Killer, enclosed a key to help with the cipher. Now, August 9th, 1969, a man named Donald G. Hardin claimed to have broken the cipher. It was a letter that was published in the Vallejo Times-Herald. The man was from Salinas, California, and he was a teacher. Now, August 14th, 1969, a palm print was found on the envelope. It was concluded that the letters included was written by the same person. The Zodiac didn't leave no evidence, so I don't know about that. August 18th, 1969, a watermark that said Fifth Avenue was found on some letter. It was concluded to be a watermark from the F.W. Woolworth Company, Woolworth Building in New York, New York. September 27th, 1969, a bloodstained piece of clothing was attached to a letter that was the victim. October 2nd, 1969, it was found that the fingerprints that was on the letter didn't match one of the suspected people from Texas. October 6th, 1969, an officer at Bank of America, Springtown branch in Vallejo, California, noted similarities in physical description as well as facial features. I guess they came in the bank, but it just seemed everybody was just trying to piece it together, with the ciphers being out and everything now. Now, October 7th, 1969, an inspector advised that he thinks the perp was a military background due to the type of weapons used during the killing. And one of the surviving victims observed the perp wearing military-type boots. Well, I mean, everybody could guess that. October 17th, 1969, not enough sufficient evidence for a handwriting examination was found for a handwriting examination because the only thing that had been provided was photocopies after the evidence had been treated with ink fingerprints not showing up in the database either that day. October 23rd, 1969, a newscaster in Atlanta says she believes the voice of the perp is someone she saw on TV. All late prints came from a taxi cab. This is from the San Francisco unaliving of the cab driver. All prints pulled from the cab are believed to be suspect. 30 late prints were taken in total. So listen, they got these prints the same time that lady said what she said. And again, like I said, this is just people just trying to guess pretty much, all around the world, really. Now, May 4th, 1982, the lab determined that the info offered about Joan Webster was forced and inconsistent. Now, there was a man that was arrested and assumed to have been the killer. But later, after years of imprisonment, it was proven that he wasn't the one they were looking for. Let's dive into that story. Arthur Lee Allen, born in Honolulu, Hawaii, on December 19, 1933. Grew up in Vallejo, California. Went to the Navy in 1951, but was dishonorably discharged in 1959. I'm sorry, not dishonorably. He was honorably discharged. He served on multiple submarines and earned the China Service Medal for his service in Southeast Asia while in the Navy. On April 4th, 1958, he faced a special court-martial at Treasure Island for bringing a loaded .45 pistol onto the Navy base. He was found not guilty. He was mostly served in the reserve. Since he mostly served in the reserves, I can't talk today, y'all. Since he mostly served in the reserves, only being active sometimes, he was able to go to college to where he received 2 degrees. From 1960 to 1962, he was an elementary school teacher in Atascadero, California. I might have messed that word up. Then he moved to another school in Fairfield, California. While at this school, he was fired for having a firearm on school grounds. Another firearm, sir? This time on school grounds with kids? Okay. In 1966, he was hired as a teacher in Valley Springs, California. And just 2 years after being there, he was fired and charged after allegedly molesting students. Wow. Just so you know, guys, all the schools he worked at was elementary school. Yeah, babies, y'all. Like, what a sicko. Okay. He became a suspect in 1971 in the Zodiac Killer case because his friend Don Chaney reported him to the police. Now, Arthur met Don in 1962 while he was a school teacher. They didn't become friends until later in 1968, though. So Don claimed that for their 1 year of friendship, throughout it, Arthur confessed his desire to kill couples at a popular spot called Lover's Lane. Okay, this was just a desired confession. Horrible, but was not an actual confession of the crime. But the kicker is that Arthur started telling Don how he would use a gun with a flashlight attached to the barrel, just like the Zodiac Killer, and that he would write letters to the police under the Zodiac's name. Remember how I said some of them sounded like they was fake? So, of course, Don thought it was him. I guess Arthur thought he was his friend and would be proud of his sick ass. Most definitely delusional, okay? I mean, sir, you are an elementary school teacher at this point. How dare you talk about them babies like that? Damn sicko. So Don decided to change the subject and never visit the topic again. And then he reported his sick ass. Good for you, Don. Oh, excuse me. Don said he also remembers Arthur saying that he wanted to shoot the tires out of the school buses and pick the little darlings off as they come bouncing out of the bus. What a little bastard, okay? That's what ultimately made him get the police involved. I'm glad, Don. When the police visited Arthur at his job, they noticed he was wearing a Zodiac watch emblazoned with a cross over a circle, the same symbol the Zodiac Killer used to sign some of his letters. They obtained a search warrant to search his trailer and discover hunting knives, plus a freezer full of dead hamsters, squirrels, and birds. Did he not have food or were they just practice? Okay. Now, why he kept them though? That's my question. So the detectives didn't find any evidence linking him to the Zodiac murder. They say they came away a little depressed. I don't blame him because, I mean, you know, he's a pedophile, first of all. And then he got this one on. I'd be depressed too because I'm like, oh man, I thought we got him. Fast forward to 1974. Arthur crossed paths with the police again because he was arrested and charged with child molestation. Good. Damn pedophile. He spent 3 years in prison for it at Atascadero. Might have said that wrong. State hospital prison where the state tried to treat pedophiles. Now, why they tried to treat pedophiles back then? You know, it's said that during this time, the murders and the letters that the Zodiac usually sent out to reporters has stopped completely. Now, there is a family that Arthur was close to named the Seawater. They knew him since the early 1960s. He formed a special relationship with single mother Phyllis Seawater and her 6 children while he was a teacher. It's said he was especially close to the 3 eldest kids, Connie, David, and Don. He was, of course, that father figure that they needed, taking them on excursions and giving them gifts. That's what a pedophile does, though. The Seawater kids recall details of several trips Arthur took them on. In the summer of 1963, they all drove to Tejas Point, might have messed that name up, which is a remote area of the beach in Santa Barbara. He asked the kids to wait in the car while he went down to the beach. He was gone for almost an hour. When he returned to the car, Connie said she noticed he had something red on his hand. Now, because she was about 9 or 10 years old, she didn't understand what it could have been or what was even going on. She says she also remembers him carrying something that he placed in the trunk, and then he drove away from the beach in a panic. This trip would align with the timing and location of the Robert Dominguez and Linda Edwards murder. Remember, they were both shot and unalived on June 4th, 1963 in Santa Barbara. As we know, their unaliveness was tied to the Zodiac Killer. Connie also recalls that on October 28, 1966, Arthur took them to the racetrack in Riverside, California. She remembers feeling groggy and being laid back on a seat. She feels they were all drugged during this time. She remembers coming out of it and being led back to the car on October 31st, so that would mean that they were all out of it for days. And they have no recollection of what happened during the time either, she said. Wow. The audacity, right? I mean, he was drugging these kids. They remember being drugged. They weren't too young to not know what was going on. But he probably was messing around with the children too, because he was a damn pedophile. Now, during this time, a body was found. On October 30th, on the grounds of Riverside City College, a woman named Sherry Jo Bates was found dead. Now, no connection was made to tie this to the Zodiac, though. I bet you all are wondering, how do you remember these details at your stage in life? You were young, and now you are much older. Well, when she saw the 2001 Zodiac movie with one of my favorite guys, Jake Gyllenhaal, she had an epiphany. I guess it all came flooding back. Once she saw the scene where my guy, John Carroll Lynch, had on a wetsuit hood, she realized she had helped Arthur make a very similar one. That's when the dots started connecting, and she noticed way too many things that were not just a coincidence. So after Arthur was given a suspended prison sentence on May 13, 1977, he spent 5 years of felony probation, in which he was able to complete successfully in 1982. He worked as a mechanic and cashier to make ends meet after. Now, when the Seawater kids became adults, and after the movie in 1992 came out, David says he reached out to Arthur and had a life-altering call with him on the phone. He says that Arthur admitted to drugging them as kids and to molesting poor little Connie. Damn, pedophile. Told y'all. David says at that point, he just flat out asked him, "Were you the Zodiac Killer, man?" David says there was a deathly silence after he asked him that, and he didn't hear anything for a second. Then he heard a gasping noise and crying come from Arthur. What a little weakling, right? He then collected himself, Arthur did, and came back in a real weak voice and said, "Yes, it was me." Now, by this time, Arthur's health was declining and he was an old man. I think that he may have wanted to tell someone while he was on his deathbed, so to speak, just, so he could get out a confession so that he didn't have to go to the grave with that on his chest. Who knows, though? I mean, he could have really been lying. He could have really idolized the Zodiac Killer this whole time and been a copycat. It was so many people out, and there's so many stories of killers who were actually copycats, I think, because so many people try to take, credit for the Zodiac. I think the Zodiac been dead for a long time, okay? He may still be alive, but he probably dead and gone. But whoever he was, he got away scot-free either way. Now, on August 26, 1992, Vallejo Police Department and fire was notified of a person needing assistance at 32 Fresno Street. When they arrived, they found Arthur's lifeless body on the floor of his basement. According to the autopsy report, he died of arteriosclerotic, probably said that wrong, heart disease, basically, though. He was 59 years old. I wonder if while he was dying, he saw any of the victims that he actually did kill, because he was a copycat. And you know how in the movies they show up around a person so that they can have a horrible death, kind of in a tormenting kind of way. Or as retribution, like, now you're going to see the face of your victims so you can remember what you did. And now that you do, just die a horrible death already. Kind of sick, what I just said, huh? You guys feel where I'm coming from, right? I know y'all do. Now, after his death, police raided his home, and among the items they discovered was the same watch with the Zodiac symbol on it that Detective Toshi had previously saw him wearing, and other miscellaneous things. Now, let's back up for a sec. A month before he was found dead, back in July of 1992, one of the Zodiac Killer's survivors, a man named Michael Megiu, might have messed his name up, so sorry, identified Arthur in a photo lineup as the man who shot him at Blue Rock Spring. The man screamed, and I quote, "That's him! He's the man that shot me!" End quote. However, conflicting testimony from other witnesses meant police could never use this to charge him with the crime. It's like they almost had him a few times, but never got him. Kind of slap in the face for his victims, really. Moving forward, in 2002, just 10 years after Arthur's death, Police Inspector Kelly Carroll told the San Francisco Chronicle that DNA evidence never even pointed to Arthur as the Zodiac Killer. He stated, and I quote, "Arthur Lee Allen does not match the partial DNA fingerprint developed from bona fide Zodiac letters," end quote. In 2023, a year later, after the Seawater kids participated in a Netflix series called This is the Zodiac Speaking, in hopes of giving everyone involved some closure. David died of cancer. He was 73. What do you guys think? Was Arthur the Zodiac, or was he just a fan who wanted so desperately to be known that he would lie about being the killer? And maybe he was so enamored by him he wanted to be like him and a copycat. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos coming at you from It's Candy.